Hi, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Mac here, and today we're taking a deep dive into daffodils. This plant is one of my favorites. It didn't used to be, but it's grown on me because I love what the cultivators have been doing to produce some really unique specimens among daffodils. There are over 50 wild varieties of daffodils, originally from the Arabian Peninsula, all around the Mediterranean and in parts of Europe. You have a lot of different plants to choose from, and the hybridizers have produced some truly magnificent daffodils. So if you want to know how to grow daffodils, this is the video for you. Of all the plants that you could add to your garden, why would you select daffodils? Well, I count 4 key reasons. 1, the plants are low maintenance, not the hardest plant to take care of at all. You can pick them up in the fall as bulbs, put those bulbs in the ground, plant it to the right depth, and in the spring, you'd have these beautiful flowers. They tend to bloom also in that first year after planting. You'll have a selection of flowers to go with that. So low maintenance plants. They're also deer resistant and other critter resistant as well. There's actually some toxins inside of this plant. This entire plant is toxic, so never lick on it, don't chew on it, don't bite any of it, and make sure that you don't get any of that liquid that comes out of it, mucilage that comes out of it once you clip off those blooms. If you want to take a bloom and cut it, make sure you don't get any of that on you, because that could be a skin irritant as well. But that means that the insects and animals don't like to chew on this plant either. So in that regard, they tend to be pretty resistant to deer and other pests. Another great aspect of daffodils is that they are perennials. These plants come back year after year. I love to buy a plant once and then have it continue to grow for me. Now, these are really wonderful because most daffodils tend to naturalize very well. You'll plant a small clump out, and in a few years, you have a clump that is 2 to 3 times that size. So they tend to naturalize really well, and they're a very long perennial bulb. So you can plant this and enjoy it for many, many years in the future. Native to the Iberian Peninsula, the Mediterranean, and parts of Europe, there is a wide variety of daffodils. There are over 50 wild species, and the hybridizers have taken those and blended them and produced thousands of unique cultivars. Now, you can get some really large daffodils like this one, and this one is Bright Jewel. Look how tall that is. Really tall plant, long stems. These blooms are going to stand up really high. But you could go in the exact opposite direction and get a small plant. And here we have Snow Baby. Look at how small that is. But not only are we talking about the difference in the size of the plants, but there's a great variety within the blooms. This is a trumpet shape on that petal there, so that is also a nice color. We have this creamy outer and then this like pale yellow there. This one hasn't even bloomed out yet. There it is. You can see a yellow with a nice darker yellow interior. That is a beautiful color combination. But Snow Tip is when you start to get to some of the frilly blooms. The hybridizers have been doing a great job. We have these 5 outer petals here, but look at that interior, nice dark yellow with the frills on that. One of my favorites, Jet Fire. Look at that dark orange. That is just so pretty. You have that classic yellow daffodil color, and then that interior Jet Fire, that dark orange interior. And so these are just some of the different types of varieties that you can have. And here is Tete or Tete, but I believe it is Tete. This is one of the more classic that you can find just about everywhere. This is one of the most popular daffodil varieties, and this is grown all over the place. It is a dwarf as well, but it's a very common size of daffodils. So there is a tremendous variety of daffodils, and they make great cut plants as well. You cut those beautiful stems off, which won't kill that plant as long as you don't cut off the foliage, and you can have, these are just in a cup, but you can put these in a vase and have wonderful daffodils inside. Now you can also keep these inside or put them in a prettier pot if you want to, or leave them in this pot. And once these blooms are spent, then you can transfer them outside. So that's another benefit to growing daffodils. There are 2 times a year that you can plant daffodils. You can plant them in the fall as bulbs. Get those bulbs in the ground. Then next spring, you'll have beautiful daffodils coming up for you. Or you could plant them in the spring. And you could go to your garden center and pick them up just like this, already blooming or right before they bloom. I kind of like to get them where they're already blooming because this allows me to see exactly what the plant looks like. I see exactly the size of the plant. I see the shape of the bloom. I see how large the plant is. Oh, wow, this one is, I didn't realize back in this fall when I was just looking at the bulb that it would be this tall, and I didn't realize that. But picking them up in the spring costs you a little bit more money. You definitely can get to see exactly what that plant looks like though, so you can plant it in the garden. Another great thing about picking them up in the spring, if you're unsure about planting depth, then you can take this pot and use this as a marker. You want to plant this in the ground at roughly the same depth that it is right now. So you would dig a hole as deep as this pot is, about as wide as this pot is, take the interior out here, plop that down in the ground, put a little bit of mycorrhizal in there to help with the growth around that bulb, a little bit of fertilizer on the bottom, and you can do really well with this. So that's a great way to do your daffodils as far as getting them in the ground. They don't tend to be very fussy plants, but you have to make sure that you're planting them at the right times of year. And that would be in the fall in a bulb, or you can pick up that plant in the spring. When planting your daffodils outside, make sure to plant them in full sun, to part shade, and well-drained soil. This tends to be well-drained soil that they're coming in now, but you want to make sure that your soil is well-drained. In their normal native environment, most daffodils tend to grow in environments that are slightly moist to slightly dry, somewhat dry, but they don't grow really well or come back and naturalize for you in extremely dry conditions. So know your growing conditions and know if you rather want to keep them in a pot or put them in the ground and let them naturalize. Going back to planting those bulbs in the fall, you want to plant them at a depth about 3 times the height of the bulb. So if the bulb is about this tall, you want to go about 3 times that into the ground, typically about 6 inches, 8 inches at the deepest. Don't want to go much deeper than that. Again, if you're pulling it out of the pot, you can't follow that same rule. The rule of thumb then is to plant it at the depth that it is in the pot. You can go a little bit deeper, throw a bit of mulch on top, but for the most part, can't go much deeper than what the pot has already given you, or you run the risk of killing the plant. I mentioned adding in some mycorrhizal fungi when you're putting your plants in the ground, but you could also add in some bone meal or some bulb fertilizer to really give that bulb that juice that it needs to grow well for you throughout the year. Daffodils are not very finicky, but they do need periodic watering. Make sure you keep your soil slightly moist to damp. Don't overwater this plant. Make sure it's in well-draining soil, and if you have a pot, make sure that pot has holes in the bottom to drain off any excess water. If that water collects around that bulb, it could potentially kill that bulb. One of the keys to make sure that you have daffodils coming back and growing for you and looking this beautiful year after year is to make sure that you do not cut the foliage. It's okay to deadhead this post-bloom, that post-bloom period, that's fine, no problem. But you can't cut back the foliage. Unfortunately, you tend to forget where you planted it, and you may be mowing, weed eating, or doing something, ripping things out of your garden, and people will rip the plants out of the ground, or what happens a lot of time is they cut back that foliage. The foliage is what's needed to fuel that bulb so it can grow back and be stronger next year. So make sure you don't cut down that foliage and let it die back naturally. If you do that, you'll have a wonderful daffodil that will tend to bloom this year and expand. Speaking of expansion, every 3 to 5 years, you want to pull that plant out of the ground, take off those side shoots, separate them, and replant them. You can let those clumps grow naturally, but this is a way to make sure that you can expand those clumps, give those plants the room that they need to grow, and give you very thick and thorough blooms like this. If you're growing a lot of foliage and not getting a lot of blooms, that could be an indication that it's time to lift the bulbs, separate them, and then put them back in the ground again. You want to put them back in the ground with what I mentioned before, a nice potash, a bit of fertilizer, bulb fertilizer, and that'll help you make sure that you have blooms the following year. Also, if you have plants that are growing stems and they're falling over, this really tall one, isn't standing up as straight as I would like, this could be an indication that the plant is not getting enough sun during its growing phase. So you may want to move it, lift it after that year, move it into a position that has a bit more sun, and that may help you with producing a stronger stemmed plant that can stand up. You should not have to stake your daffodils, but if you do, then it could be a case where they're not getting quite enough sun. There's a couple ways that I really like to incorporate daffodils into my garden. One is I love to plant them at the base of trees. We have some apple trees, so I love to get daffodils at the base of trees, around trees. That also makes sure if you're close to the tree that you're not hitting it with the lawnmower, because you forget that foliage is there. That helps me make sure that I'm not hitting that plant with the lawnmower. Another way that I like to plant daffodils is alongside my roses. I keep most of my roses in pots, and then I put the daffodils in the pots around it, because before the roses start to bloom, or way before they're blooming, you could have some nice flowers in your pot as well. That's two ways that I love to incorporate daffodils into my garden design. One of the key things to watch out with daffodils in pots is to make sure that they're not overcrowding. These don't tend to be overcrowded too well, but I have seen them for sale in pots. You could actually see the bulbs just all crammed in there, and that may be a great buy for you because you're getting more bulbs for the money. But after these bloom, you want to take them, separate them out, put them into individual pots, give them more space. Think about 3 to 4 inches around each bulb in the pot, because you want to make sure they have enough room. They're going to produce their own offshoots, they naturalize well, and they're going to make more. So you want to give it enough space. That overcrowding could also reduce the amount of flowers that you get the following year. So this has been a deep dive into daffodils. It's one of my favorite spring blooming plants. I love the coloration on this one. In particular, I like the ones that are like this, where you get that different color there. There are also some pink ones, very pale pink, and a little bit of white. You can get that as well. And then these frilly ones is another one that I'm really fond of. Let me know down in the comments which type of daffodils that you prefer. There's a lot of variety. Hey, if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, follow along, and I'll keep doing these wonderful deep dives into plants, especially some of my favorites like daffodils. Until next time, take care.